Thank you. I love that part. Comes in handy. I do run. You can just put it right in that box. We'll keep the same box. Just stuck to it inside. Is that easier for you? Thank you, sir.
I'm trusting this to you.
Barbara.
Hey, Barbara. My little staple right there. With my little card on the inside.
Beautiful.
Worldwide rat.
Camera's open there. Barbara, I am recording the session. Rabbi did reach out to me, and you are now a co-host.
Okay, I just let a person in, so I know that.
Yay.
TK Thorne wants the phone number in case because she's gonna be on her telephone. I
Okay.
hope you can send that because I know it. Stuart, did you see the email from TK and can you return her email?
I didn't return her email because it was sent to you, but I did get it. Would you
Can
like?
you take care of that while I'm taking care of letting people in?
Okay,
I don't know the answer, so hopefully we can get that.
I am. Hang on a second. Yeah. I got it right here. Hang on.
Okay, can you answer her, Howard?
I'm going to go back to here.
I think all of those extra office supplies that no one needs.
And let me 1 second.
Move them down into storage.
but I mean, she should be able to use her cell phone and zoom in.
See, I think she wanted it as a backup just in case.
Okay.
Okay, let's trust that she can get in.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. We are 1 minute past 12. So let's start talking about Mishpatim. Howard, are you going to be by yourself? Susanna's another meeting today?
No. Suzanne's here. She will make an appearance.
Okay, good. I hear her.
The spirit moves her.
All right, is everybody ready?
Sure.
Okay, Mishpatim, this week's parsha is a big change from the excitement and powerfully magical moments at Mount Sinai from last week. There's a big change in tone from that mystical event to the laws and halachot of Mishpatim. Last week we read of a trembling, suspended mountain. And it's really interesting to me that some sources say that this trembling mountain suspended over the people was like a chuppah suspended over the people. And remember, when you see the rabbi's video on Mishpatim, where is he standing? He's standing in front of the chuppah wall hanging in the conference room. I loved it. I mean, he's smart enough. He probably did that on purpose. He can't just have been randomly looking for a background, but it was good. Okay, so here we have this trembling mountain with crashing thunder and lightning, all accompanied by a sharp, loud blast of a shofar. Okay, get your pens and paper out. There's a geology lesson here. But no, I'm not going to get into the geology this week. That's too much of a luxury, given everything else we have to talk about. And I can't use my former day job to explain anything about why there was a shofar sounding. People standing at the foot of the mountain who witnessed these happenings and saw Mount Sinai wrapped up in smoke became very afraid. Hey, Moses, they called. Now, excuse me, this is not a direct quote. hey, Moses, you need to go up that mountain and bring down the teachings to us. And Moses returned with the book of the covenant and read it to the people. It says that in Exodus 24, verse 7. Mishpatim presents 53 mitzvot. 30 of them are prohibitions, 23 are positive commandments. And the mitzvot cover civil, moral, and religious law. They include how to treat servants, laws for making loans, rules for operating courts, penalties for theft, for murder, for kidnapping, how to cover damages, rules for kashrut, and more. These are guidelines for social issues and legal issues over a wide range of interactions that you could have with others. The people's response, again, chapter 24, verses 3 through 7, they say, we will do and we will hear all that God commands us. Now, these laws have had a major influence over our modern lives through time since the days of Moses. Jewish law has been given credit for successful societies because it outlines political and social roles in a community. So we see it many places, but in the US Constitution, for example, valuing human life, equality, and excuse me, I need to add of man, equality, justice for all, and just the presence of laws. It values laws. Now, history in our own lives include more than just the exciting events, like what happened at Mount Sinai. And in his Parsha video that he made for this week, Rabbi Henkin points out that even the usual, mundane, small things that occur in our daily lives, boring as they are essential to our connection to God. Rabbi Henkin reminds us that God isn't with us only for the milestone, big, exciting, significant events, or only when we're sitting in services. Rather, we need to recognize the ways we all connect to God in our everyday life. Now, of course, I knew great place to start asking you to talk about how you connect to God in your everyday life. What links do you have? Can you please, someone, share an example? And Diane, you are a large picture on my screen. Can I ask you first to tell me a way in which you feel a connection to God every day in your regular life?
Well, I don't know why I'm a big picture on your screen. Did I do something wrong?
But now you will be, because now you're speaking.
Oh, well, so, I start the day with Modeh Ani, and honestly, it becomes more and more real for me every day that I can get up out of the bed and take care of myself. It is a connection that I have faith, gratitude for having been able to do this my many years, and hope it continues for many more.
Very
So
nice.
that's my connection.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, I could be the Madam Professor and call left to right and get everybody, but do we have another volunteer? Someone who can say, yes, I make a connection. Howard.
Yeah, well, one of our regular activities is walking every day. Every day it's not raining or something else, but pretty much every day, and just being outside in nature. I feel, I guess I'd say I feel uplifted. I don't know. I don't converse with God. I'm usually listening to a book, but just the way it makes me feel, and I am appreciative, because I got a lot of years to be appreciative for, and I am.
Suzanne, Suzanne's cutting him off. Suzanne, anything to add from your perspective?
Well, no, Diane just reminded me of something that I do. There's just a certain place in my apartment that it's far from the window, but I can look out the window and see the apartment, and I can just see the windows in the apartment. And every day, I have bad glaucoma. Every day that I see those windows, I say Modeh. That's when I say my Modeh, not when I get out of bed. But there's a certain time when I look to make sure I can still see that.
Great. Anyone else? Anyone?
Well, I might mention, I say the Shema and say the Modeh every morning, but I tried to look around at other prayers that might reflect how thankful you are to God for waking up in the morning and being alive. And I would encourage everybody to look at the Hashkivenu prayer. It really speaks. I can translate a little bit. Lay us down, Lord God, in peace, and raise us up again, O our King, unto life. Spread over us your tabernacle of peace, and so on. But it's we say it probably every day, certainly every week in the Shabbat prayer book. So it particularly spoke to me, so I thought I'd share that.
I wanted to ask a question. Hashkivenu is not the prayer in which we say the words, "Let no one be punished on my account." That's not part of Hashkivenu. Suzanne, do you know what prayer that's part of?
Let no one be punished on my account?
Yeah, in other words, if someone
I understand what you're saying, but I don't know.
You don't know the prayer. Anyway, I think that those words always make me think twice about my feelings, my behavior, and so forth.
Diane, that's a right ask the rabbi question.
Okay, all right. I will read it. One of us will read it this weekend.
That's right. That's right. TK, you came on. Any contribution for where God plays a role, or you connect to God every day?
Well, I may have, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, I may have a little different feeling about what God is than most of you. But I am grateful to the universe, God, whatever. Similarly, when I'm in nature, when I'm in my garden, when I'm doing something that absorbs me wholly, and probably lately, even as I get older, I'm most appreciative when I touch the love of friends and family.
Thank you. Thank you. Margaret, did you think of something? Do you want me to continue?
Well, I don't know that I specifically think of God. I have from my apartment, if I take all of the blinds and put the lower part down and open the upper part, which takes a little trouble to do, but after they've been cleaned. But anyhow, I can look out my window and see nature. So I do that frequently. I think when I'm doing anything where I'm moving around, which often involves things like crawling on the floor trying to see what's in the bottom part of my refrigerator, because now I have a lousy refrigerator instead of my beautiful, upside down refrigerator. But anyhow, when I'm moving around, then I have a sense of gratitude that I'm still able to do that.
Very good.
So it's more a sort of a general sense of gratitude that's elicited by nature, by moving, and and by a bunch of other things than, you know, a specific God did this for me sort of connection.
Thank you. Thank you. My connection that I'm just thinking of this morning is very lowbrow compared to yours. Before we came on, I was skimming the news articles, and there was one that said, for heart health, give up these 3 foods. And the first one was bacon. I can't tell you the last time I had bacon. Now, should I thank my smart ambitions for heart health? No. I have to thank the laws of kashrut that it wasn't bacon, or that bacon isn't part of my daily, my monthly, my yearly, whatever. So I know that anytime I make a decision pretty much about any food that's not vegetarian, that's got, well, really, fish, except for shellfish, I am reminded of that connection. And I have friends who keep kosher who will say exactly, it is a conscious reminder of God every time I'm there. So thank you to surfing the internet this morning for 10 minutes before we came online. Don't eat bacon. The second one was white bread. I can't remember the third. It also really didn't apply to me. I haven't eaten white bread because my mom did not allow white bread. So, I mean, I would have white bread if I had a sandwich out. So, but I appreciate all your comments about the fact that whether we're conscious of it or not, we are considering God in our everyday life. And we have those links. Mishpatim begins the very first line, as God tells Moses, you shall set these laws before them being the people. And that's really interesting because there's no body of laws. There are no tablets. There's no book that he can physically set in front of the people. It's been described as a presentation to everyone, much like a buffet table, where some things are delicacies and treats, like holiday observations, and others deal with everyday needs, like bread and vegetables. And together, they cover the rules to hold a society. Each of us then can choose for ourselves which of the mitzvot presented. And remember, we're thinking back to free will. Which of those mitzvot are we going to follow or not follow? That is, of the ones that are relevant still today. Now, in his book, Rabbi Sacks focuses on connecting empathy, or the connecting theme of empathy among a lot of the halacha. He considers how many times in these Jewish laws are we instructed to consider the situation others find themselves in. So let's talk about empathy. When I think of empathy, I think of sympathy, I think of apathy, all these apathy words. But what are they? What are they? So is this in your professional wheelhouse, Margaret? Or someone? Can you give us more than my dictionary definition?
Well, I don't know if it's more than your dictionary definition, but empathy specifically means putting yourself in the shoes of somebody else, as opposed to, say, sympathy, which means feeling something, you know, having an emotion for elicited by or for somebody else. So I think that's, I don't know if I frankly did not reread Sacks this.
You had read it last week.
Yeah, so I don't know if he says that or not, but I was reading his commentary for this week. And I was interested that he, what he started with is, why is the first commandment about slavery? And you should not, mistreat other people because you were mistreated. So he starts right off with empathy, that you're, putting yourself, that the first commandment says, feeling, you're able to feel what another person feels, and that should govern your actions.
Anyone else have a comment on empathy? Any examples from everyday life come to mind? I think most of you know Keith Abrams, and he gave me a great example, which wasn't what I thought of. But Stuart, did you get ready to say something?
I was just going to say something about the feeling of empathy as it applies to physicians, because in medical school, I don't know how well it's taught, but I like one of the first things you do is dissect cadavers in medical school. And what happens, I think, here it is, a dead person, and you're cutting them up. You find a way, in order to tolerate that, you find a way to, as a person, to detach yourself cognitively from what you're doing. You're doing it, but you're not involved in it. And so that's what physicians have to do over time as they train and then practice medicine, is not become too emotionally involved in their patients' problems. They can be extremely sympathetic, and I'm not sure if empathy is the right word, but if you become too empathetic, you can't be, as a physician, objective about understanding what the patient's medical problem is and how to handle it and how to recommend things to them. So I was interested in what people thought. I mean, do you particularly like physicians who are that you feel are more empathetic to you, or does it matter, or you just want the best technician? Now today with medicine has evolved so much into a technology, that's not exactly an empathetic word. So I'd be interested in hearing what Howard has to say, or other people have to say about their interactions with physicians.
I don't understand why, excuse me, why empathy is a negative for a physician. It it might influence the way he says something, but not what he does. If you know the best course for a patient is X, putting yourself in their position, in their place, well, how is this going to sound to them? How can I say it?
Well, I can just give you this example. Being, I was a pediatric doctor, and we would have residents come in, like radiology residents who I was there to teach. And the residents, I frequently would ask them if they have enjoyed their day in pediatric radiology. Said, I just can't, there's all this crying babies and all this, hubbub going on about the babies and the children. Too much for me. I've got to get out. But I think they were expressing what they felt, that they could not, they were so emotional with how they were interacting in the medical situation that they couldn't analyze, be objective about their assessment of a patient. I mean, that was very common and universal in a lot of these residents.
Stuart, this is TK. I was listening to what you said about having to distance yourself from what you were doing, and I really identify with that as a police officer, because we had to do the same thing, and it took really kind of years before I was able to back off of that and find my compassion and my humanness to add back into it. So I just thought that was really interesting. And And I think we have the same issue with things that are going on in the world. That if we were to try to empathize with all the awful things that are happening, we would be overwhelmed and unable to function. So we have to kind of find a way to prioritize or to balance all that.
I was going to say that during my internship, where I was really, the academic stuff was over and I was learning to do psychotherapy during my internship, I would see a patient for however long, an hour, 45 minutes, whatever, 50 minutes, I guess. And then I had to take a break for at least 2 hours before I could see anybody else, And it took me, one of the skills, as Stuart is saying, is one of the skills that you had to develop as a policeman, as a physician, as a psychologist, and I'm sure in many other, is the ability to detach and yet not become inhuman. The other thing I wanted to say is I saw my primary doctor for my yearly visit yesterday. And it's only the third time I've seen her, and she's been, quite very, very, very pleasant and certainly thorough, and I'm very pleased with her. But yesterday, something came up, and I told her something, and she said, "Oh." She said, "Oh, I'm really curious about that. I know I'm being nosy, but tell me more." And things I never would have, necessarily had any reason to volunteer during but I just enjoyed that so much, and I thought that was. That was great. Now I have another reason for liking this doc.
Without belaboring it, I think as far as physicians go, I think there's something of a difference between like what Stuart did and what I did. I think for primary care doctors, you almost have to develop some sort of a relationship. I mean, that's sort of goes with the job. I mean, it's like Morgan is developing a relationship with her doctor. The one thing that's bothered me about medicine, really in this respect, is I'm finding, as I'm now just a patient and not a physician anymore, really, that how little doctors touch people now. I mean, I think that's not the kind of connection you're talking about. That is a connection, and we are so mechanized. I mean, we're so dependent on all our tests and our x-rays and blood work, and rightfully so. I mean, we've gotten so much better that I don't know if you people have noticed it, but it's not like it used to be. People don't even, take your clothes off anymore. It's just different now. I mean, it's.
I had a dermatologist in. I had a melanoma years ago, so I had to go to the dermatologist a lot, and I had a dermatologist in Philadelphia who was a man at least my age. No, he's older than I hope he's still living, but he was wonderful. But as he examined me, he would touch me in a just so the nicest kind of detached, but nice way. And I noticed that although I like my dermatologist, I trust my dermatologist that I have now. She looks at me with through a glass.
Fine glass. Yeah.
Right. And I'm sure she does a great job, but I don't think she's actually physically touched me in all the treatments I've seen her.
So I just want to add one thought, and that is, I don't know if other generations feel this way, but I feel that our particular generation has seen more dramatic changes than any other. I remember going with Howard to the doctor years ago, and Howard said, you know, the doctor doesn't even look at me. He's always playing on that thing. So instead of the doctor looking at you and asking questions and writing down your response, your doctor is now talking to you and he's looking at a computer screen. I actually had a doctor a little older than me apologize. I'm not being rude, Mrs. Slaughter, but I need to key in every single thing you're telling me, and that's why I'm looking at my screen. So not only does the physician not touch you anymore, he doesn't even look at you half as much as he used to. And not to make eye contact with someone, you know, I went to a new doctor about my eyes this week, and your eyes are very important. And all he did was say numbers and someone keyed it in, numbers and someone keyed it in. I don't think he ever looked at me directly to speak to me. And so we've had to adapt. We're getting better care, but it doesn't have that warm fuzzy feeling that we're accustomed to. And that's just the way it is. You know, younger folks who are in their 40s and 50s, they didn't go to the doctor that much, so that it's changed. It doesn't matter to them. But to those of us who've had the touchy feeling, it matters a lot more, or in my opinion, it does, for what it's worth.
Stuart, and then we'll close off this. Okay, Stuart.
Well, relative to the feeling of empathy, there now is a bona fide medical diagnosis termed hypersensitive person, HSP, hypersensitive person, not Schönlein purpura, but hypersensitive person. So people whose sensory mechanisms are heightened are said now to be much more empathetic. Their ability to identify with other people and their emotions is much greater. So I was wondering if anybody, I think my Barbara, is a hypersensitive person in true medical reality. And she's extremely empathetic. So I was just wondering whether other people feel like they are more empathetic than average.
I don't know about myself, but I remember Maxine Lapidus so well. She would judge people by whether or not they smiled and said hello. And anyone who smiled at Maxine and said hello was a really good person. And it was pretty funny to listen to her say, you know, she would say, oh, look at so-and-so. You know, I really like them. They're such a good person. I'd say, really? How do you know them? She'd say, well, I don't know them well, but they always smile and say hello. So they're a very good person. I just think we have to be adaptable. You know, times have changed. Everyone is different. And I think as I grow older, I understand that what is normal for one person is just not the same for everybody.
And I don't think, Stuart, I don't know that that's something somebody can say about themselves. I mean, you're able to say that about Barbara. But I don't know. I don't know if Barbara were sitting here and you asked that question, if Barbara would raise her hand and say, "Oh, I'm one of those people." Maybe she would.
Yeah. I think once she learned that there was a true underlying medical condition, that she said, well, I'll fit into that. You know, you start reading, it's like medical students. Another thing about medical students, you know, you go through this, the GI rotation, the cardiac rotation, and everywhere and the psychiatry rotation, you feel like you've got whatever disease they're talking about. It's like
So really, how do you treat whatever you called it, hypersensitivity?
Hypersensitive.
Okay, got me out here.
She
Oh,
got an
Barbara.
introverted, hypersensitive woman over here. I would not treat it because it is who I am. I mean, it just means that I've heightened sensitivities. So he always knew it because, you know, it's everything from a movie or a book dramatically can impact me, where somebody else or something scary can really go to the core of me very quickly. So that's an example, but also very loud noises. Now, I tend to be more introverted because I'm hypersensitive, and I realize that now, but it took years to figure that. I mean, I didn't know it. I just could see my behavior, but then it just came up in the medical literature. It's, you know, and it was like one thing after another. So it is who I am. And I think I've passed it on to one of my kids, and that's fine with him. He doesn't mind. It's just who we are.
So do you think you are particularly an empathetic person?
I've been told that. You know, I just thought that's normal for everybody. But not everybody feels deeply about everything for another person. I realize that. Been very always attracted to the underdogs, if that makes a sense or whatever. But I think it's just the way my neurology is, that the neurological system is tuned up. And I think my nervous system is just, once I read the book about Noah's wife, I don't know if
TK is
TK is on, but I started thinking, well, I have a little bit of that, you know. I like to go out and talk to the animals in the field and, you know, mellow out my nervous system. So it's empathy, I think, is just who I came with, but I think you can develop empathy. And I think you can suppress it if it overwhelms you. I don't watch really scary movies. It wouldn't be good for me. That kind of thing. Margaret, do you need to see me in your office? Does that sound okay to you? Do I need to be changing, Margaret?
I don't know. Maybe you just need to work as a psychologist for a while. Get all that, or a police officer or a physician.
Yeah, calm it down. Okay. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Barbara.
No,
Thank
the
you.
world needs hypersensitive people.
Thank you.
I have a
I'd like
dog
to-
with one too.
I'd like to
and I agree.
drag us back to Rabbi Sacks. Stuart, do you need to conclude a thought there?
I'm sorry, about what now?
I wanted to know if you needed to conclude a thought that you started, because I'd really like to go back to Rabbi Sacks and talk about what you brought up last week. We're on page 92, which comes from Exodus 23, verse 9. What does he tell you about treating a stranger? This is where he starts with his empathy. Go ahead, Stuart.
All right, the stranger and strange land. Well, one of the things, and others are going to disagree with this, but as soon as I heard that phrase, stranger in a strange land, I thought about Elijah. So, you know, we all on Passover have a cup of wine and open the door at a certain stage in the service for Elijah to come in. And, you know, that the idea about it has been that Elijah was such an unusual person, and he could change into being anything. And in doing so, he could encourage the Messiah to come to your house. Well, I never thought that was, I thought that was a mythological sort of understanding. What I always understood was, here was somebody I didn't know, Elijah, you know, coming out from somewhere and coming to your Seder, and this was a stranger in our house. And so it always made me think that it was important to open your arm. Always, one of my dictums, and I've told Barbara this many times, my Barbara, that I value is I try to leave my arms wide open at all times for new friendships, because you never know when your new best friend, whether be they a lot older than you or a lot younger than you, if they come into your life, they can have a big impact on your quality of life. So I think it's really important to keep your mind open, keep your heart open for new people, strangers who can come into your life.
Great. The Pope do not wrong or oppress a stranger, because you know the feeling of being a stranger. You were strangers in the land of Egypt. Points out the need for empathy for those different from us. And Stuart, you just expressed that, older, younger, different, not from Alabama. And we have empathy, I don't want to say automatically, but we have easier empathy for those we know. And strangers, there's less of a connection to. So family, friends, community, co-religionists, maybe, well, that would include Israel. We have a reaction to them that's different from someone we don't know. Who do we see as strangers? Who are the strangers? And why are they strangers? Who are strangers? Why are they strangers? How do we make them not strangers?
Well, I would, to me, it's very obvious in this day and time with the polarization that we have in America, especially politically, that the people who are across the aisles ideologically from you are strangers in that way. They think differently, they act differently. And it's very hard I think it's hard to empathize with somebody if you see them as strangers. You've got to develop, to me, a different mental attitude towards them so that you can open up your mind and open up your heart to break down the barriers that are occurring during polarized times.
Our Jewish practices, our code of laws teach us some of this empathy because of valuing human life. And Sacks goes into the idea of Jewish people stepping right in to come to the assistance of others. And he talks about helping Gandhi, helping Martin Luther King, working with Mandela. And he mentions Israeli medical teams going to disasters. I was with him. Because now let's skip back to geology. My field is earthquakes. And as a seismologist, every big earthquake was something to be studied. So in my generation, times where I first met Israeli medical teams and rescue teams, search and rescue operations. 1985, big earthquake in Mexico City. Rushed buildings, middle of the town, understanding the geology. It's because it's built on an old lake bed where it's very unstable. The Israelis were there. 10,000 people were killed. They rescued some who survived. 1988, Armenia, Northeast Armenia, huge earthquake again. 1999, Turkey, again, lots of building collapses. And I'm not going to go through every single earthquake. Let me skip to 2010, Haiti, the Haitian earthquake. You remember that one? Everybody here remembers 2011, Japan, the one with the earthquake, near shore, big tsunami, wipes out Fukushima power plant. I wasn't involved in that. But Fukushima power plant, it lost power, it overheated, the reactor cores melted, they lost their cooling towers, they lost a ton of Japan. People couldn't live there. Crops growing there, and it was an agricultural area, couldn't be used. Well, we can get closer to home too. Israeli help, humanitarian aid, Hurricane Katrina, and on and on and on and on. And the last one that I know of, big earthquake back in Turkey a year ago, February 2023, Israeli aid again. So I don't mean to concentrate on geology, but that's my experience. And yes, you can see demonstration of empathy because of the way we value life, what we think should happen. And when Israeli medical teams went, they were going to help strangers. And people aren't supposed to be strangers. Another thing we talked about in an earlier parsha, we're all made in the image of God. Others aren't strange. They're just humans we haven't met yet. Now, if we look at the specific examples that Sacks goes over for how to treat strangers, we could look at his laws for lending, or the laws for lending. Who can you charge interest to? I don't know you, I'll charge you interest. No, according to the mitzvot here, you can't charge interest to a stranger. And he uses the example of the poor are strangers. The poor are strangers. And it's chapter 22, verse 24. If you lend money to my people, meaning the poor among you, don't charge them interest. Don't charge them interest. Interest can be charged for business loans where there's a profit to be made, but not from the poor who actually may need those funds for survival. And one view of that is that the rich only have money, the wealthy only have money because God made it possible for them to have. So the rich guy doesn't, didn't mean to say guy, the rich person doesn't deserve to be rich any more than the poor. Yeah, you're keeping track of all my missteps, Margaret, all my biases.
No, I'm saying girls or guys.
Right. The rich person doesn't deserve to be rich. The poor person doesn't deserve to be poor. God's people are the wealthy and the poor. Help each other. But it's okay to help those who are closest to you first. And the older brother of a good friend is a rabbi. Sadly, it's his yahrzeit today, but he tells a great story about this. A stranger approaches wealthy Mr. B on the street. Alms for the poor, please, the stranger asks. Mr. B shakes his head and responds, no, sorry, I can't. I need to give it to my brother and sister who are indigent and much worse off than you are. Well, later, the poor stranger happens to meet the brother and sister and talks to them. In the conversation, he discovers that Mr. B never gives them any money. And Mr. B violated the law that it's a mitzvah to lend money to the poor. And to make things worse, he also lied about it. And one interpretation of this is that wealth has kept him from following the mitzvot, from following a life of mitzvot and empathy. What else do we know about lending practices? I thought another one was, it's not okay to take a borrower's garment as collateral for a loan. In chapter 22, verse 25, it says, if you take a garment in pledge, you must return it before sundown because it's the man's only clothing, the only way he has to cover his skin. In both cases regarding lending, we're talking about a consideration of the needs of the other. Is that really empathy? Just considering what the other person needs? Or is it compassion? Compassion, the ability to do something, or the willingness, the desire to do something about or to help someone else. So I think in the discussion of empathy and sympathy, compassion could go along with either one of those. The other word that got me is apathy. What's apathy? I have apathy. I'm apathetic. I'm this. I'm what? I'm not feeling anything. So really, we could rank this from the lowest being apathy, not feeling anything. To two, sympathy, concern for the other, but you don't have a matching personal experience. Or empathy, where you have an understanding and a sharing of the other person's emotional experience. And that's where the example that Keith Abrams gave me comes in. And it has to do with childbirth. He can be sympathetic and say, yeah, I know childbirth hurts, or I've heard childbirth hurts. But he really can't say, I feel what you feel, and let's do XYZ, the compassion. Empathy appears in lots of situations, though, and here's one that even, male-female attitudes towards childbirth is totally different. Is there empathy in the laws of kashrut? And the one I'm thinking of is Exodus 23, verse 19. The second part of that one is, you should not boil or kill a kid in its mother's milk. Maybe. Rabbi Sacks didn't put it on his list, but it's an illustration of empathy. Do not upset or insult the mother, and certainly would. Because even though I'm not a goat, I don't have a kid, I can feel, or I can relate to what I would feel about that situation. Now, interesting to me, that rule's been or is repeated later on in different parts of the Torah. But when you look at Etz Chaim Humash, it explains that right there, since it occurs in a discussion of rules and regulations for festivals, Etz Chaim says that law is read in Mishpatim as part of rules governing festivals, because there it's a prohibition against an unknown pagan practice. Do we have to be the same as the stranger to feel empathy? I don't say we do, but we can link to similar circumstances. The issue here is that you need to know about someone or something in order to relate to another. You need to know. And we have a real ignorance issue. If we don't know about someone in their situation, we're not empathetic. And recent politics get to me about this. When you consider in education, the Black history or the teaching Black history issues that have come up in the Florida legislature. Does everybody know? I can't quote the ruling to us. It's pretty available. But what it basically says is that it sounds reasonable. It says every school must teach in every field Black history. But the problem is, it says you can only teach it from this time to that time. You can't teach it before people came to America, and you can't teach it after they're freed, which limits so much of what Black history is, that it creates a bias. And when you have a bias in the information, you're going to end up with a bias in the conclusions. And ignorance is not bliss in this situation, because you're not teaching the strength of the culture, the strength of the accomplishments. It's been described as presenting material that slaves came here knowing nothing. And I think somebody brilliant said, And some of them even benefited from being slaves. They came here knowing nothing, and they ended knowing nothing. And they were taken care of, and they want to keep, I can't quote everything, but the arguments against limiting our knowledge of each other really hurts when you think that people are passing those rules and regulations. I don't know if anybody has a greater Florida experience than I do, but my opinion of Florida government at this point is not. Now, the life-changing idea that Rabbi Sacks lists for us in Mishpatim, someone got their book and want to read it to us? Do we have that? It's page 95. Who said I have it?
I did.
Okay, thank you, Suzanne.
If you seek to change anyone's behavior, you have to enter into their mindset and then say the word or do the deed that speaks to their emotions, not yours.
And he admits that's really hard to do. That's really hard to do.
So your conversation reminds me of an experience that I want to share. I don't know. I assume many of you have met Shira Goldberg's father. He's a rabbi. I can't remember his name, but anyway, yeah, he's been to Bethel many times, and he's just a very lovely person. And so one day when he was visiting at the Kiddush luncheon, I said to him, I said, Rabbi, I wonder if you could please give me some advice. My sister is getting ready to give up her home and move into a care facility, and she's pretty unhappy about it. And I'm just not really sure how to answer her when she says things to me that lets me know how unhappy she is about having to give up her home. And I don't really know how to answer her. Could you please tell me what I should say? And he said, well, honestly, that is a very difficult circumstance to have to address. But he said, when she moves in there, she will be better off than the people who don't have a roof over their head. So it took a couple of years, but one day she did say to me, this is such a miserable existence. Who do you know that is worse off than I am? And I said, I didn't tell her I got it from the rabbi. I said, dear sister, there are people out on the street who don't even have a roof over their head. And she thought for a second. She said, I think you're right. I am better off than them.
Thank you, Diane. Thank you. Well, since Rabbi Sacks agreed that it is hard to change someone's behavior and hard to find the right thing to do or say, one thing comes to mind, and that is that if we all observed all the mitzvot in the code of law, that might go a long way toward preventing some of the missteps that we'd like to see changed. And I agree, that's also really hard to do. Really hard to do. So if we blend that with something we learned in Vayigash, earlier Parsha, perhaps with greater use of empathy, we can reshape issues and actively make things better for us. Thank you. Any comments on this?
I just thought about this a lot in listening to the news of the day, especially regarding Israel. It is such a very difficult time for us, and it's just hard. And I think the Israelis, that the world is not empathetic to what their dilemma is, and I just don't know how we will ever get that story told. But if someone could help us figure it out, it would go a long way.
I was reading a blog or something by Thomas Friedman, and then another one by Charles Blow. So so there is a Jew and a black man, and both of them said pretty much the same thing. And what they said was, in order to understand and what's going on in Israel, and what's going on, here in the United States, between the tensions between, Black people who are so sympathetic with Palestine and so on and so forth, that people think so simplistically. They think in black and white, and the only way to really understand these two very difficult situations is to be able to hold two thoughts in your head at the same time, and also to know a little bit of history. And it's hard to hold two thoughts in your head at the same time. To be, on the one hand,
If there was ever a need for empathy.
yeah, to be able to empathize with what's going on with both or all three, basically all three groups of people.
And accurate information and not biased news coverage. And
Well,
information to start with. Yeah.
And, information and a knowledge of history, which
right.
So
really,
really
so that stranger isn't the term. And it's easy to dislike the stranger. Yeah. I thank you all for your patience and your involvement. And I guess the rabbi has a few more. I mean, he's going to continue to be away every month. So, should I find out those dates from him and plan again to lead our discussion? Does someone want to step up and you want to give me any criticisms or critiques, or of course we'll accept all compliments and plans.
Rate your professor, huh, Barbara? Give us the website.
Yeah, don't give me as bad a grades as my students do. They say too hard. She's teaching us stuff we don't need to know. Yes, I was definitely a stranger to my students. No, when they were talking about doctors, I was thinking, how do you handle it as the professor? You can't be buddies with the students. I kind of feel like I'm a buddy to my primary care physician, but I still accept if she says, you have to take this pill, you have to do this shot. But if she loved me, she would make me get that shot.
He understood me. If she were inside me, could see it from my point of view.
Okay, thank you so much. Everybody have a good weekend. Shabbat shalom.
Thank you all. Thank you, Barbara.
Thank you.
My
Bye-bye.
pleasure to be here studying with you.